All right, we're going to get started. And again, security, these are things we want to emphasize. We're going to talk about tools today. We talked a little bit about defenses, the issues. It's really important. We want you to get some terminology and some understanding of how we approach security. So, upon a little review, by now you should know the accuracy of the data, who can see what, and we've already talked about how do you manage who can see what. Well, we authenticate. Okay, we figure out a way to figure out if you are who you really are. Then we authorize. Authorization says these people can see this. You know, you limit that, and then we keep track. We keep accounting. If you remember, they're A's: authenticate, authorize, accounting, or auditing. You keep track of who sees what so you can follow up and see what happened. We have to make data available. So we have to manage who sees it, and we have to make sure it's accurate. Data assurance. Are we assured that it's accurate? We need to be concerned when data is in these spots, moving, stored, or being processed. And we have lots of products and devices that we can use to secure data. We're going to talk about those tools today a little bit. People are a big part of security, okay, in terms of having them trained, having good procedures for people to follow, having the correct policies so people know what they can or can't do, good guidelines so people make good choices in how they manage data, work with data, so forth. And then these items in order to put that into place. Data is our asset. Is there a threat against it? Can somebody carry the threat out? And how vulnerable are you? Okay? What's the odds of that happening to your data? Once you figure that out, then you can measure your risk. Okay, you can measure your risk, how much risk you want to take. Mitigate. Don't do anything. Remove the risk. Have somebody else take the risk. Companies, when they have an exploit, they have to divulge that information. All right, through these. Data can be stolen, manipulated. We talked about the legal consequences. There are lots of laws affecting data and how we manage it and so forth. You know, the whole world of the NSA and what can they look at and what can't they look at. What's the government allowed to see? Because you know, when you think about it, the internet, no matter where you live, those connections accumulate in an area, you know, like San Francisco or maybe LA, you know, even in Mason City, the brick and tile building has a place where a lot of communications congregates and then moves out to all the different areas. And so at those points, the data can be viewed as it travels through. Okay? Who can see it? How well is that protected? Remember, maintain productivity. We can't lock it down so tight that nobody can do anything at work. You know, it has to make sense with your work. And we looked at those. Terrorize people by destroying things like the power grid or water supply. All these things are managed so much nowadays by technology that has to be a concern. Remember, identity theft is stealing who you are, not necessarily your credit card. Over that already. What was the point here? Remember, almost anyone can find this information out. You know, some countries like Russia, I saw an article once distributed from Russia where they were glorifying this 16-year-old that was a hacker. He had hacked somewhere in another country. It might have been the U.S., but you know, they were praising him for his skills. Cyber attacks, we talked about that. Attack pattern, we talked about that. It goes from looking at legal things all the way down to all of a sudden you're doing things that are illegal. And another one of those from the internet, I thought this story was interesting. It gives us a look at some people's approaches and what can happen to a hacker and so forth, and when they get caught. AAA, who are you, what can you do, and we're going to keep track of that. We're going to look at some other examples here too. We can encrypt data, so the data can be encrypted. It can be encrypted while it's stored on your hard drive. It can be, the data can be encrypted so people can't read it while you send it somewheres, and then you decrypt it on the other end so you get your data back. Okay. When it's being processed, no, then it's vulnerable. We really can't do much with it. It's there. Hashing is an algorithm that takes, no matter how much data you have, again, this review, and it forces it into this fixed length hash. And we're going to look at some real life examples of that. But this can be used to verify data integrity. You can take your data, send it, and then also hash it and send the hash. When it gets to the other end, the people get the data, and then they create a hash. Okay, this is the first hash. They create their hash, compare the two hashes. If they match, the data must have gotten there without any changes. And we do that. If some of you might have noticed, when you download software, it'll say there's an MD5 hash that downloads with it. And you could take your software and match up the hashes. If they match, your download came clean without any problems. Hardening equipment, we talked about that. Incident handling, security policy, both very important. Must divulge when you have an incident. And security policies are huge. You need well-written security policies for any company. Covers a wide variety of things. Some new terms. Firewall. Okay. Firewall, you can, in a network, like a lot of networks, let's say this is the internet, and you have your company here, you can put a firewall in the edge of your company so that anything inside, and you have your employees and workers, and you have your LAN, your local area network, it will let anything out, and it'll keep track of who it's letting out. And it can keep track by a wide range of things like where they're going. You can use IP, and you can use these port numbers. So it keeps track of your message, so then out here, somebody out here on the internet that you went to, when they send it back, it knows it belongs to that message and it lets it back in. But if somebody else out here on the internet, they come in the internet and they try to get through your firewall, it's not going to let them in. It won't let anything through that generates out here unless you give it permission. Example, if you wanted somebody to get to your web server, you could create a little hole so that when they come, they can get through to the web server and then back out, but nowhere else in your network. Firewalls can be a physical box. They're really, when they're a physical box, they really are certain, like a special type of router is what they really are. Or they can be software. Most PCs now have some type of firewall software on them that would help keep things from coming in to the PC. Something coming from the outside can't come in. Now if it generates on the inside and goes out, then they'll let that back in. Okay? That's the whole idea. Intrusion detection prevention. You can run software inside your network that keeps track of what's going on, and if it sees something out of the unusual, it can check to see if it isn't some type of intrusion. Something going on that shouldn't be going on in your network. This can be done like virus software, where it has a list of things to match, or it can look for abnormal traffic, abnormal things going on, like all of a sudden a bunch of files being downloaded. Okay, you can say, wait a minute, that shouldn't happen. Then it can stop it, and then send an email to an IT person and say, hey, this is unusual, maybe we should check it, see what it is. I got a great story about that, but not enough time to tell it today. Okay. Spyware you can download free or pay for spyware protection, you know, where you don't allow somebody to get in your PC and then monitor what you're doing and send information out. Viruses, everybody should be running virus software. Wireless, you should always use some type of protection, WPA2. You need to always turn it on. And you know, nowadays when you buy those, they force you to turn it on, or it's on by default. More or less, that's the default way that it's on. And if you don't, you should do that and then give it a password. Physical protection, we can physically lock doors, right? Doors lock, don't allow people access, don't leave your phone laying around, and so forth. Companies nowadays, it's really important to have a security policy. Okay, what do you allow and not allow in your company? A number of years ago, there was an employee at it was this time of year. It was a female employee that worked for Principal in Des Moines, and she sent out an email about trick or treat in your neighborhood, and it had sexual connotations to it. It's supposed to be funny. She sent it on the principal email. They fired her. She had worked there 7 years. She took it to court, and she lost. Inside the security policy, it specifically forbid sexual harassment. And sending an email like that to a whole bunch of people at the company is deemed sexual harassment. So she lost her job. All right. If your company has a security policy, you better understand it. The whole thing, what you can or can't do. And it's also very important in terms of keeping the data and so forth secure at the company. That is it for today.